This is an introductory video on the free SP 500 Analyzer app, which is currently being displayed. It's provided by Polaris Investing, and it is a fully supported application. As a reminder, what's being shown is a link to the Polaris Investing site. Polaris Investing site is used to compute defensible valuations, therefore increasing the likelihood of investment success. In this video, we're going to be talking about three main things, and that is why this application was developed, how do you go get it, and then briefly how to do some basic navigations in the application. There are other videos that go into more detail on the use of the application, and you're invited to visit the Polaris Investing YouTube channel. And the best way to discover that is to go to the Polaris Investing site, polarisinvesting.com. Take this watch and learn link, takes you out to the Polaris Investing YouTube channel. Several playlists are shown, playlists in particular on the SP500 app, and then here are the different videos that are currently available. And you're currently watching the SP500 Analyzer app introduction video. All right, before we get going, I want to make sure it's clear that the application is an Excel spreadsheet. The reason the app was developed using Excel is because of the familiarity with most people of Excel. People are very familiar with the interface, the menus, filtering, etc. Now, little of that is actually used by this spreadsheet. The majority of the logic of the code is built into VBA. Therefore, it is what Excel refers to as a macro-enabled spreadsheet. If you go look at the file of the spreadsheet, it has .xlsm as an extension, clearly identifying as macro-enabled. And this brings into the question whether you can trust the spreadsheet and its VBA code. So you're invited to go out here and read in this worksheet called TrustIt. There's other ways that I'll be showing you. You can also read the same information without actually opening the spreadsheet itself. One thing I want to make sure you quickly look over is this middle paragraph of this TrustIt worksheet, and that is advice on how you generally set up your Excel environment to prevent harmful code from being executed when you download a spreadsheet that you're not real familiar with from the internet. All right, here on the S&P 500 tab, I want to point out three main links: the Watch and Learn link, which we just showed, the Polaris Investing link, we've been out there, and then what we'll be getting into more about how you go get the application is a Dropbox link. Now, the reason you would take this link here to go to the read-only public Dropbox site is if you were to get a pop-up message during the use of the spreadsheet that indicates that there is a more recent version of the spreadsheet available, then you would take that link, shut the spreadsheet down, and then do the steps outlined actually in this Dropbox worksheet in terms of getting the newer version of the spreadsheet. Now, let's next talk about why the spreadsheet or this application was developed. Well, the main reason is two reasons. Is you want to move beyond viewing the SP 500 as just a black box. Instead of, it's easy to forget, but as the name implies, there's up to 500 stocks that go into the making of the S&P 500 index. And the other main reason is that it provides a way that we'll be talking about in other videos, but in this watch list area, you can use this worksheet to create a subset of the overall S&P 500 index. But first, let's talk about the black box nature of the S&P 500. For most people, what they do is they go out periodically, maybe go to a site like the Yahoo that shows some history of the S&P 500, and then maybe they'll use it to compare against, let's say, a specific stock. And here I'll just type in Microsoft, and end up with some kind of comparison. You can see here that over the last year, the Microsoft has trended fairly closely with the S&P 500. And that gap between the performance of the S&P 500 and a stock or portfolio that you happen to be comparing it to is often referred to as tracking error. Now, the thing with tracking error is that as a mutual fund manager, you want to show your value by outperforming the S&P 500, but you don't want to drastically underperform the S&P 500. So you want to track somewhat the S&P 500 and hopefully be like Microsoft is here, up on the upper side of the graph, always above the S&P 500, but never trailing it drastically. Now you can see here Microsoft did about a year ago trail the S&P 500, and then it outperformed it here more recently. And this is kind of what a fund manager would prefer: rarely trail and more often outperform the S&P 500. Now the problem is when you're building your own S&P-like portfolio, it's easy to quickly become just a closet indexer with your portfolio. And if you just end up matching, the overall performance of the S&P 500, then it's really not worth the effort. You might as well just become a passive investor and invest directly in a Vanguard or a BlackRock type fund that tracks the S&P 500. So tracking error has an upside and a downside. The upside is, you want to make sure you're performing better than what you could do with the passive investing. But if you tune your portfolio to be like the S&P 500, you quickly become a closet indexer. Well, this style of creating your own portfolio that tracks the S&P 500 is referred to an S&P 500 like, or a smart beta, also recently referred to as index plus, although I think it's more to think of it as index minus, that you're actually trying to take out of the index stocks that you think will drag the overall index down, and just focus on a handful of stocks that you think will outperform, and therefore outperform the overall index. So maybe it should be called index minus. But regardless, a suggestion: you might want to go out to the YouTube site and look for a video that was recently done by Joel Greenblatt. He's a hedge fund manager that also teaches at Columbia University. And a video of him was shot in early 2019, around mid-January, where he was talking at a CFA chapter meeting about this kind of technique, and invite you to go out and take a quick look at that. But the overall goal here is to take what you consider the best of the S&P 500 and hopefully minimize tracking error, but not to the point of becoming a closet indexer. The actual mechanics of using this spreadsheet to do that is discussed in another video. All right, let's now talk preferred way of the way you go get the application itself. You go out to the Polaris investing site. Here on the launch page, you just scroll down till you see this download link. You take the download link and go to the S&P 500 analyze folder. Inside that folder is the XLSM file. Click on it. You'll view it in your browser. It defaults to the first worksheet in the spreadsheet, and this contains further instructions. But basically, it's just coming up here and hitting the download, and it'll bring it down to a folder of your choosing. And then when you go to open up the file, it'll be in protected mode, and you hopefully have your Excel environment set up that you then open up or enable editing and then use the application. Now, if you don't want to even open up the app in order to think more through the trusting aspect of it, you can also on this site view the trusted information. And like I pointed out earlier, you want to pay attention to this, how you set up your environment in general for to download any spreadsheet off the internet, let alone this specific spreadsheet. Now, I will point out that you want to make sure that your environment is set up so you do allow for external resources to be accessed, because real-time stock quotes, historical stock quotes are queried, and also some company profile data as needed. while you're using the application. So that does need to be enabled in your environment. So when you download the app and you first open it up, you will see several worksheets. But not all of these need to be maintained in visibility. As mentioned, the Dropbox folder, once you've downloaded, you can hide that. The Manage tab we got a separate video that talks about these gray cells as to how you would, which ones you might want to turn off or on, and just do something besides the default. But it's more configuring the application, but you can typically hide that. The About is what we're going through in this video now, so once you get familiar with the navigation, you can hide this About tab. The TrustIt tab is something we've already discussed, so you can go ahead and hide it. And that leaves you the Perspective tab, which is, like its name implies, allows you to come out here and just review some information, to put whatever's going on in the marketplace in perspective. Goes through this chart that we've talked about many times, which shows that the market, does go way above valuation and way below valuation. Provides some background on the SP500 index and talks about daily, monthly, yearly volatility, kinds of volatility you can expect from the SP 500. Defines some drops, pullback, correction, bear, crash. Over here gives some suggested ways to think about investing, and some buy rules and sell rules. Scrolling over to the right here is a discussion on the instability in the marketplace, and some thoughts from John Maynard Keynes from a book that he wrote in 1935. Hyman Minsky, 1976, wrote a paper called Systemic Fragility. And also there's a link here to watch a video, a 2-minute video where Benjamin Graham is talking about investor psychology, and another video here that quickly goes over the impact of these sudden fluctuations of opinion in the marketplace, and this concept of presentism. So I invite you to come over here, and occasionally when the market is behaving very erratically, making big moves, refreshing your memory on some of the thoughts around some of the real historical heavy hitters in the investment community. If you scroll down, it gives you lots of information about bear markets. Over here it talks a little bit about the driving force behind down markets, and namely the lack of liquidity, using this stormy sea analogy. Also has a table here that gives you information about the VIX index, which is also referred to as the fear index, but it looks at the VIX index as a published index that's widely available on the internet, and typical range is anywhere from 10 to 20%, which is based on put and call volume that's out there. It gives you an idea of kind of the volatility that's built into those options, and then if the volatility is, like I said, between 10 and 20, that's considered fairly normal. If it's below 10, means the market is very subdued and not very fearful at all. If it rises much above 20, it means that the market's expecting some pretty high annual volatility, and this is what it equates to in terms of monthly and even daily volatility. So you probably don't want to hide this perspective. Another one is charts, which gives you current information about the SP500, how it's tracking, both like in this one chart, the purple line represents the total return, which includes dividends, and the blue line is the historical trend of the S&P 500 without dividends. Over here is a drill down of the S&P 500 over the last year. Up here it gives you annual return, and then the orange line is what the historical average is. And if you scroll down, it gives you more information about historical trend, what kind of news events were going on at different points when the S&P 500 was going up or down. Shows you what how different kinds of stocks, micro caps, small stocks, large, how they've performed typically over the years, and then some other graphs down here that you may find useful. There's nothing on this worksheet that needs to be updated. Everything on it is automatically updated as you do things on the S&P 500 and industry worksheets. Last two worksheets or tabs to discuss are the industry and S&P 500 tabs. There is a separate video on the industry tab that I suggest you go watch, but we're going to be focusing the rest of this video on the S&P 500 worksheet, and in particular this area of the S&P 500 worksheet. And just briefly mention, this is a roll-up of the information that's being displayed over here to the left. This left area that is over here is referred to as the portion of the S&P 500. We're currently by default showing 50 of the top capitalized stocks of the S&P 500. And as I mentioned earlier, there's this watch list area for building your own portfolio or just watching stocks in terms of price changes day to day is discussed in a separate video. All right, so the main way that you interact with the spreadsheet is through these cells that have a gray background. And the primary one is this cell M1. Whenever you click on it, you update the current prices that are being displayed. You'll notice here that the time is changed. The date didn't change because the previous refresh had already been for the current day. But every time you can click this as often as you want, and you'll see each time you do it the time that you did the refresh. Now, after the market is closed, if you were to click on that, the time would still update, and if it was a weekend, even the date would update. But you would get the prices from the previous close. So the prices, as you click over the weekend, for instance, or on a holiday, would not change. But again, the time and the date you attempted the refresh would change. Since this video was originally recorded, you can now have M1 automatically selected on a recurring basis by activating a timer. The timer is controlled by these three cells in column L on the Manage worksheet. L1 turns the timer on and off. L2 allows you to associate a audible beep every time the timer goes on. And then L3 sets the duration of the timer in minutes. The timer can be quickly toggled on and off by clicking on cell O1 in the S&P 500 worksheet. Now over here in cell K1 is you can specify the exact date that you would like the historical dates to be. So when the price change is calculated, it looks at the price change between the current or most recent refresh and whatever historical date that you indicated. And here's where you would type in the date. So let's say I wanted to back it up and look at something as far back as maybe the 5th of 2018. I would type in that, hit return, and then it would go out and bring in the stocks from that particular date and show you the difference here and then up here is the index itself. This is the overall index price change from the 5th of October through a few minutes ago. This is the overall roll-up of the 50 stocks out of the 500 that are currently being viewed here in this portion of the S&P 500. Now, if you were to clear this, it would return back to the previous trading day, and so now it's done a refresh and it's brought in the close as of the day before. If you did that, if you hit clear again, it would re-bring in the historical prices. But you really only need to do that once a day, because historical prices, obviously, unless you're changing the dates that you want to go back and look. But if you're just interested in the previous closing day, you just need to do this once a day, and then when you brought the spreadsheet up later in the day or over the weekend, you would just click on this cell here to get the most recent price data. When company profile data needs to be updated, a pop-up box appears directing you to click on cell AJ1, which is different from cell H1 that is shown in this original recording of the video. The profile data is this information over here, the beta of the stock, the full company name. Now the company, sector, industry, we don't change very often, but number of shares outstanding in the beta do. So Once a week, that information is updated, and then if your spreadsheet hasn't been refreshed within a week, you'll get a pop-up, and then you just come up here and click on this, and you'll see here it goes out. You can click on it any time, but doing it during the week, nothing changes, but so you'll just end up with, and it'll tell you that it's refreshed the profile data. Since this video was originally recorded, a new feature has been added I want to point out here in cell N1. It's used to highlight if earnings are soon to be released or if they've been recently released. So if you select soon, you see some of these background of some prices change, indicating that they will soon have an earnings release. You can also select recent, highlight earnings that have recently been released. Now, the dates of earnings releases are approximate, so it's important to check. For example, Berkshire earnings are indicated to be released soon, so I click on its price and take into this website. From there, you can get a second forecast of when earnings will be released next. Now, what is determined to be either soon or recent is based on the current date and then a value that's set here in the Manage tab of number of days either before or after the current date. So anything that can be considered recently released in terms of earnings means it's released yesterday or earlier. If it's soon to be released, then that's today or later. But if you want to change the number of days you look back or forward, you can do it here. All right, just quickly going through some of these other gray boxes. Is the sector over here, which is roll-up information. You can also choose to look at roll-up information from a tier, and tier 1 is just being identified here, tier 2, and these are just attempts to group stocks. You can specify up here how you want, what rows you want grouped into different tiers, but typically you use this group here as your top 6, which represent about 20% of the overall market cap of the S&P 500. Now, another gray box that you can use to see that even more, if I were to do tier 1, then you can see over here that this is the total market cap of the S&P 500. This is the market cap of the portion that we're looking at over here, the 50 stocks that we're looking at over here to the left. And then when I've filtered on just only interested in tier 1, and this roll-up information, it's telling you that you're looking at about 17% of the overall market. So 20% roll up to just round up to around 20% is what tier 1 is represents. If I go to tier 2, which is the next 20 stocks, you can see here that represents about 20%. So between these two tiers, you're getting close to almost 40%. And then if I go to the remaining tier, which is referred to as tier 5, you see out of these 50 stocks, what's left, the remaining 20 represents about 13. So between all of the tiers that make up this portion of the S&P 500 that's being displayed to the left here, you're getting about 50% of the total market cap. And again, market cap is just the current shares outstanding based on the last profile refresh that was done, the current market price. Now, the ordering of these stocks is based on the market cap as of the previous Friday's close. So if prices change a lot during a week, you may wonder why Amazon's not number 1 now and as opposed to Microsoft. It's based on the capitalization as of the previous Friday. I want to point out this column O that shows at any given time what the overall portion of the market cap that the particular stock represents. And again, with these tier 1 companies, you can see that they represent quite a large portion of the total 50 stocks that you're looking at. And that, again, I want to point out that's of the portion that you're currently looking at. If you wanted to know how much, let's say, Microsoft represented of the entire S&P 500, you would need to multiply this number by this number. And typically, the top 50 stocks represent around 50% of the S&P 500. So as a rule of thumb, just divide by 2. So instead of 6.7, it's about 3.2% of the S&P 500. This one here is about 1.5% of the S&P 500. Now, if you wanted to see more just going to return this back to its default sector view. But if you wanted to see more than just 50, you can come down here and just simply grab the last row, grab the handle here, and just move it down as far as you want, and it'll continue to add in additional by market cap stocks out of the S&P 500. Now you notice the prices don't get updated when you do that. So what you have to do once you've extended as far down as many more rows as you're wanting to look at, you just come out here and re-click on updating prices, current prices. It'll detect that historical prices are missing for these new tickers that you've added, and go ahead and bring in the historical prices as well. And also update this count up here that you're now looking at 64 stocks. Now if you save the spreadsheet based off the Manage tab will truncate back to the default number of rows, which is shown here, 50. If you wanted to keep those 64 around, you'd need to update this number to 64, or whatever number that you want to keep around each time you save off the spreadsheet. Now the reason for that is just as you include more and more stocks to be part of this portion that you view here in the worksheet, it just takes more time to update historical and current prices for a bigger group of stocks. And when most of or at least half of the S&P 500 is represented by just the top 50 stocks, it's really not that beneficial to extend beyond the top 50, and that's why the default is it truncates back to 50 every time you close. Okay, just a couple other minor cells that you may want to modify. One is over here where you indicate how many rows you want in these different tiers. So you can see here right now that value set to first 6 stocks are considered to be tier 1. The next 20 stocks are considered to be tier 2. And then it's actually any stocks after that, or you're just setting to 0. In other words, you're only going to have 3 tiers: tier 1, tier 2, and then when you don't have all 5 potential tiers, then the last tier is just referred to tier 5. The thing I want to point out is that up here we do see the price change for the 50 or 64 stocks now that we're currently looking at, or the portion of the S&P 500 that we're viewing. And then this is the actual follow-up index in terms of what is changed. So typically they're going to be very close to each other, but not always. So this has been a quick, or not so quick, overview of the S&P 500 Analyzer app. There are other videos available, as I mentioned, that go into more detail on the watch lists and some other things. But this video we covered why the application was developed, preferred way that you go get it, and then some information about how to use or navigate the application. So thanks for watching.